Hello and welcome to today's Monday OurGame show. Myself, Michael Verney, and delighted to be joined by another Tipp man, albeit not Shane Stapleton this morning, John McIntyre. How are you, John?
Hello, Mike. How are you?
Good. I'm wearing the Galway jersey, John. We're sponsored by OurGaretro.com. Fair to say it was a varying weekend in terms of emotion for Galway people.
Very much so, Mike. And in fairness, the footballers really lifted the gloom in the wake of the hurlers' defeat 24 hours earlier. It was a smashing win for the footballers. It was a game that was on the knife edge all the way through against our arch rivals, Mayo. Victory could have gone to either team. Galway looked in trouble at various stages of the match. Wexford's efficiency again let them down in front of the post somewhat, but nobody could fault Galway's grit and heart and commitment to pull that game out of the fire. And of course, Conor Gleeson scoring a Ryder Rovers type point to win the game for the tribesmen, just added to the occasion. There was a tremendous crowd there. And I think, there has been this narrative about provincial finals being no longer relevant, especially in the football championship. And we had a hullabaloo about the draw being made for the All-Ireland series ahead of the Connacht and Munster finals at the weekend. But there's still great passion for it, especially when those title races are competitive. And there's very little between Galway and Mayo traditionally. And again, we had something similar yesterday. Damien Comer, he's a one-man battering ram. His return to the Galway team has really ignited him. And I think Joyce and his management played a blinder yesterday in keeping John Maher and Shane Walsh from the selected team in reserve. Great players can do damage most of the time, but in some games they'll do real damage against tiring opposition. And it was... Shane Walsh has been through a tough time over the past couple of years. The controversy over his transfer from Kilkerran-Clonberne, and that his form has dipped. He's had trouble with injuries, but in the last 15 minutes, when Galway really needed him yesterday, he stepped up, scored 2 great points from play. Good to see Matthew Tierney returning again. He has been on the sidelines for a long time. And furthermore, another boost for Galway going forward is that Killian McDade was on the matchday squad for the first time this year. And I think it has been underestimated, Galway surviving in Division 1, missing such a battalion of key players. But they all seem to be coming right just at the right time. They're mad for road because they're as fresh as daisies. I often think in the modern GA world, teams are training too hard. And we've seen it countless times, players coming back from injury layoffs, and they're taken back to the water like ducks. They're very keen, very enthusiastic, and as fresh as daisies. And you could see that in Comer's play yesterday, as well as Shane Walsh and Matthew Tierney when he came on. So a great day for the Galway footballers, and they're dangerous now, Michael, to be honest about it. They have a tough enough group coming up, with Derry coming to Salthill on the weekend after next, and then playing the Ulster finalists. The last team in the group is Westmeath. I saw Galway and Westmeath in Mullingar last year. Westmeath were better in 2023 than they are now, and I suppose the lack of jeopardy in these four All-Ireland groups, with 3 of the 4 teams emerging for going on to the All-Ireland quarterfinals and preliminary quarterfinals. 24 matches to get rid of 4 teams. It's absolutely ridiculous. And I know it was a big deal about, would it be better for Galway and Mayo to win or lose yesterday's Connacht final? To be honest, it doesn't really matter, because both of them, on all known form, should still be standing when these group matches are over.
John, there's hurling folk absolutely mad for chat here, and mad for conversation, because it was another kind of a mad hurling weekend. Just before we get into the action on the pitch, John, I cannot get my head around this. It seems like hurling is GA Go only at the minute. Like last weekend, we 2 games on GA Go. The Wexford Galway game at 4, we Tipp and Waterford at 6. That's okay in an isolated kind of sense. But this weekend, again, we have Cork and Limerick at 7 p.m, I think it is, on GA Go. And amazingly, Dublin and Antrim is not being broadcast, even on GA Go, let alone RTE. And we have Carlow and Kilkenny on GA Go. I just can't get my head around the product that we have, how good of a product it is. We don't have that many games in the hurling season compared to the football season. We're going to be absolutely rammed with football very, very soon. There's going to be games left, right and centre. When you get to the end of the provincial campaigns in hurling, like we've 2 preliminary quarterfinals, and with due respect, they're not going to be marquee games. 2 quarterfinals, 2 semi-finals and a final. I think we're missing an open goal here, I have to say. I can't believe that even like with RTE's scheduling, that they haven't put hurling a bit more front and center. I don't know if it's as simple as saying that they're trying to drive subscribers to GA Go and they're profiting off hurling's popularity, or the fact that these are going to be blockbuster games. But I honestly cannot get my head around it. That it would be 3 weeks from broadcasting one hurling game live on RTE to the next one. I don't know what you think yourself.
I couldn't agree more, Mike. To be honest, I was shocked that either the Galway-Wexford game or the Waterford Tipperary match were not live on television on Saturday. Now I understand RT were committed to the European Champions Cup semi-final. They can't show every match, and there are limitations on that. But in that context, then, for the game between Cork and Limerick next Saturday, not to have live coverage is scandalous. I mean, this is a game, I think Páirc Keefe is going to be rocking. The Cork fans, I think, would have seen enough in their narrow defeat to Clare to say Pat Ryan and his team have learnt a good lesson from their opening round defeat. And it's sink or swim for the Rebels on Saturday. The All-Ireland champions are rolling into town. As I said, it's probably going to be packed to the rafters. It's going to be a great occasion. Cork fighting for their lives. Limerick, the champions, going for the 5 in a row. They don't want to have a defeat on their CV before they get to Croke Park. It's going to be a cracking match. And as you said, Michael, you know, in 5 or 6 weeks' time, the hurling championship is nearly going to be over. And I suppose we shouldn't suffer from an inferiority complex either, the hurling public, because the football championship in theory should be more competitive because there are more teams competing for it, for the Sam Maguire Cup. But the reality is, let's be honest about it, there's only 3 or 4 teams that's going to win this year's All-Ireland football title. Dublin, Kerry need to improve on what I saw against Clare yesterday. Galway are coming with a surge at the right time. You can't entirely write off Derry, but they had a bad defeat in the Ulster Championship against Donegal. Donegal obviously have improved under Jim McGuinness, and Armagh, can they close out a big game when it goes down to the wire? There's question marks over them. Mayo, I suppose, will regroup, but outside of that, what other team is a serious contender for the All Ireland title? Now I know Limerick shadow is hanging over the hurling championship, but on any given day, the likes of Tipperary, Galway, Clare, are capable, Cork are capable of rising to the challenge and forcing them all the way to the wire. But the absence of a live hurling match for 2 weekends in a row when the season is really cranking up is just unfathomable.
It really is. I know you're saying like Limerick are going for 5 in a row and they're going for 6 in a row in Munster, but look at the amount of brilliant provincial games we've had the last couple of years. Like nearly every game in Munster the last couple of years was brilliant. I could definitely name out 7 or 8. I just can't believe that we're missing an open goal here. And like hurling how will hurling grow at all in any other counties if it's hard to see it? Like my parents are they're retirement age. They're definitely not retired anyway. I can tell you that because they're farmers. But they don't know there's a hurling championship hardly going on. They don't like the whole GA Go thing is nearly frightening for some older people to try and even sell.
Yeah,
let alone like having to have. You have to have really good internet to watch it. Like I know for a fact there were people down in Wexford and Waterford and different places over the weekend that were back listening to the Waterford game on the wireless because they couldn't get up GA Go because their connection was poor or whatever. I just I can't get my head around it. I really, really can't. I think we have an unbelievable product and we're not selling it. And even whatever, I understand that all games can't be broadcast. I 100% understand that. But are you telling me that 4 provincial finals and 2 in particular in football are more appetizing than any of those hurling games that I've mentioned? Because they're not, and that's just a matter of fact.
But I echo everything you're saying. And if you didn't have access to GA Go over the weekend and you watched the Sunday game highlights last night of the 2 hurling matches. Now, I was down in Wexford Park on Saturday. And all it did was give you a teaser of the game. I mean, there was no. The footage from the game did last barely 10 minutes, so it's only a snapshot of what happened. So you really had to have been there to kind of understand how good Wexford were and how poor Galway were. And I suppose on the other hand, then Michael. Our argument is it weakened by the fact that only 6,100 and some odd people turned up in Wexford Park for a game that was do or die for Wexford. The Wexford hurling fans, a lot of them had given up on Keith Rossiter's men after blowing a 5-point lead against Dublin first day out. And then, I mean, the shock of all shocks, 7 points up against Antrim, an Antrim team that had been destroyed by Kilkenny just a week earlier, and ending up being beaten by 2 points. But as we all know, you're still trying to play the game, and it's a long time since I've played it. But,
I like the way you said I'm trying to play.
But the bottom line is, when a team is beaten unexpectedly or produces a poor performance, 9 times out of 10, if there's anything in them at all, it's going to come out in the very next fixture. And that's what we saw with both Tipperary and Wexford at the weekend. But it just makes you wonder, like, Wexford don't need a psychologist. They probably need 15 of them because you just don't know. They only seem to hurl when their backs are really to the wall. Look at 12 months ago.
Tom Dempsey had a great line, John, about Wexford. He said, the greatest consistency about Wexford is their inconsistency. They heard some stuff on Saturday, but why in God's name do they need to have their backs to the wall and to go into the head to produce that? That's
a good question.
Yeah, you knew from 5 minutes in. We'll go into that game now. You knew from 5 minutes in that Wexford were on, and just even I remember Liam Oak hit someone in the middle of the field after about 30 seconds, and there were kind of statements made all over the pitch. And from a Wexford point of view, it was a very, very heartening performance from the Wexford public's point of view and the few thousand that were there to support them, because they just gave absolutely everything that they had. The question will be, why do they have to wait until they're in a precarious position before they do that?
Well, we saw it 12 months ago. There were 15 points up against Westmeath in Wexford Park and ended up getting beaten. I mean, for those of us on the outside, how in heaven's name did that happen? It just defies logic. And but the following weekend, to go out and beat Kilkenny. So
Yeah.
Wexford have previous when it comes to stuff like this. And you go back to the Antrim game. They probably went up there thinking, and you look at another team's result and you're saying, God, these fellas really aren't up to much. Kilkenny have walked through them. But Antrim had clearly targeted the visit of Wexford. They had some of the Dunley players back, and there was a real edge to them. And it was great for hurling in a general sense that Antrim pulled off that victory. But unfortunately, Wexford tend to be the victims in such scenarios. But fair play to them, given that the previous weekend they had messed up against Dublin as well. The Wexford dressing room must have been a tough place to be in Corrigan Park after that game. But to their credit and to the credit of Keith Russell, their manager, they regrouped and channeled all that hurt and grievance and disappointment into to be honest, an epic display against Galway on Saturday, reduced to 14 men with 20 minutes to go. They hurled like devils. And I was making the point earlier about freshness of players. Rory O'Connor's first
Yeah.
game of the year was against Antrim, and he struggled a little bit, obviously trying to get up to championship pace. Last Saturday, Galway couldn't handle him at all. I mean, he hooped Adrian Toohey out on the sideline, and he nearly had the ball over the bar before Toohey was back on his feet. Now, that's a slight exaggeration, but he was so energetic. It was like as though he hadn't been hurling for 6 months and he wanted to compensate for all that. And he was so fresh. He was so fresh. And Lee Chen, what a man. I mean, Lee Chen is in, the twilight of a terrific career. I'm not sure if he has got the credit on a nationwide basis that he deserves. I mean, he really was outstanding against Galway on Saturday. Galway couldn't handle him either. It's a great success for Wexford. But what are they going to do now? They have they've Carlow and Kilkenny left. Carlow, as we have seen this year, have made significant progress. They have some outstanding players. They actually, for a brief 5-minute spell against Galway in Pearse Stadium, you were kind of wondering what's going on here. They had reduced a 8 or 9 point deficit to 4. And then against Dublin, they conceded a very soft goal. We're only beaten 4 or 5 points. So they're not going to be simple for Wexford if their heads aren't right. If Wexford players are in the zone on what I saw on Saturday, they're a match for almost any team out there. Now the Kilkenny game is obviously going to be challenging. But they've given themselves an avenue back at least into the knockout stages of the All-Ireland Championship, and having worked so hard on Saturday, they will have no excuses for blowing that in those 2 matches.
Just a comment in there just a comment in there from Martin Furlong. He says Owen Ryan I thought was brilliant. If he's anything like the Uncle Dara, he'd be okay. Dara Ryan was some player back in the day, all-star fullback, class player. Rory O'Connor, John, he was fantastic. Chin, I don't know, I don't know if you could see it or you're able to watch the replay back. Chin got an unmerciful belt to the ball in through the bar of the helmet. Like he ended up with a proper shiner. He looked like his eye was kind of closing up even. And he came back on and there wasn't a bother on him. His striking of the freeze was brilliant. Just that catch over Fintan Burke in the second half. Like his arm was kind of contorted backwards almost. Like I hate to say it, like, but Galway are crying out for someone like that, aren't they? They're crying out for someone that can just take the game by the scruff of the neck, because Galway are. It's hard to know what to read with Galway at the minute. And I looked at the Leinster final. I looked at the All-Ireland semi-final last year. I remember the Leinster final the year before, and I just thought Henry cut such a frustrated figure. You've been on the line when teams are doing. You can see the fruits of your labour, and you can see when they go between the white lines, they're doing X, Y, and Z, and you can nearly smile to yourself at different times when you see things coming off. Then there's also times when you don't see the fruits of your labour, and your frustration is borne out. And he cuts a very frustrated figure to me, because to me at different times the other day, Galway didn't know what they were doing, and the fact, like, you have to say it, like the 15 on 14 for the last 20 minutes, and like Wexford looked like they had 3 or 4 extra men around the pitch. It was a mad thing to watch.
Yeah, before I leave Wexford, I just want to say an important part, maybe in their much improved performance on Saturday, was Liam Ryan's return to the defence. He had a big game for them. They seem to have discovered a really lively midfielder in Connor Hearn. And Damien Reck is a fair detail at centre back. Conor MacDonald threw open his big shoulders as well against Galway. And it was a fantastic success for them, especially with so much pressure. They just had to come out and deliver a performance. They weren't sure they were going to beat Galway. I mean, it's the first time they've beaten Galway in the championship in 28 years. So that kind of puts into perspective the scale of their achievement. In relation to Galway, they looked clueless in the last 20 minutes when Wexford were reduced to 14 men. And as you said, Mike, there was a couple of occasions when it looked as though Wexford had the extra player, and they worked the ball across the field late in the match for a point for Conor Foley, and there was hardly a Galway player within sight of making a tackle, and I thought that was an awful reflection of Galway's display on the day. I think they had struggled against Kilkenny, an injury hit Kilkenny team. But I make the point, though, that even though Cody and Mullen were missing up front, John Donnelly and Martin Keoghan aren't always handed a jersey for every championship game Kilkenny plays, and yet they scored 8 points between them from play. So how much more damage, for instance, if Mullen and Cody had been playing, would have done? And they did have 15 players on the field. But still, Galway were disappointing. The ease with which Kilkenny opened them up to score a necklace of points there, especially in the second half, was extremely worrying. And you would have imagined Galway would have been on a war footing going down to Wexford Park, given what they had seen Wexford were capable of 12 months earlier, when 7 days after losing to Westmeath, having been well in front, to come out and take care of Kilkenny. So Galway wouldn't have had the blinkers on. And that's what makes it even more disappointing. But I do think the team management are culpable in some degree. I just said it in my match report earlier this morning that Garage McInerney, Dahi Burke, and Pádraig Mannion have all won All-Stars. Multiple ones in the cases of Dahi Burke and Pádraig Mannion. And none of those players are being picked in those positions currently. Garage McInerney has just come back into the team. He's into his 30s, and they play him at wing back. Garage McInerney is one wing back, Dahi Burke is the other wing back, and Cathal Mannion, one of the best wing backs of the modern era, is floating around the full back line. And essentially, Galway are trying to put square pieces into round holes at the moment. And I know as a former manager, you get an idea about something, and sometimes it's difficult to change in midstream when this plan is not working out. But the Galway players and the management got a serious wake-up call on Saturday. They're being beaten for pace. You go back, Mike, in Thurles 3 years ago in the All-Ireland, was a quarter-final where Cork ran the legs off Galway in the first half, but couldn't put the ball in the net. Galway should have been beaten that day. The chickens are coming home to roost. This is the problem for Galway today or yesterday. They're still heavily reliant on a hardcore of players that did the business for them back in 2017, but they're playing some of them in the wrong positions. I mean, for instance, the previous weekend, David Burke and Sean Lennon was Galway's midfield partnership. Sean Lennon was wing back, where I've never seen him play before. At any level, to be honest. David Burke was midfield, the star of the 2017 All-Ireland final. And both of them were left off for the visit to Wexford. Galway bring on 5 subs and no sign of Sean Lennon or David Burke. And I just completely can't fathom why they have recalled Jonathan Glenn. He was never the most artistic hurler in the first place. He did have a nuisance value, don't get me wrong, on certain days, his ability to win the hard ball was significant for some of Galway's victories over the years. But it's 5 years since this man tagged out for Galway. And what message is that saying to the other Galway players on the squad, individuals who are not even making the first 26? So I think Galway have an awful lot of tidying up to do. There's a lot of criticism of the management over the past 48 hours. And to be honest, only for Henry Shefflin was the brilliant player that he was. It has insulated him. It is, from any sort of potential heave or anything like that. But supporters are getting a little bit frustrated. But the bottom line is, maybe Galway are not quite as good as some observers think they are. Because if you go back to last year's All Ireland semi-final against Limerick, similar to Kilkenny in the final, they were blown away by Limerick in the final 20 minutes. Against Dublin in the round robin series, they trailed them by 12 points. Now, I know they came back to level, but that shouldn't be happening. That wouldn't happen to Limerick. It wouldn't happen to Kilkenny. So there's a lot of questions about this Galway team. And to be honest, they should beat Antrim and should beat them comfortably. And in mitigation, they were missing the team's best player, Cathal Mannion, in Wexford Park on Saturday. But Dublin rocking up to Pearse Stadium in 2 or 3 weeks' time, a team in the modern era that traditionally hurls well against Galway, that has the three members of the Galway management that guided them to the All-Ireland title in 2017, and of course go back to 2019 when Galway didn't even come out of Leinster due to Dublin beating them up in Parnell Park. So that's no formality for Galway, but they've got to kick up, where now, Mike. And if they don't respond to it, we can safely say that Galway's reputation has been exaggerated.
Just on that, John, I was listening to an interview that Henry did with Galway Bay before the Leinster Championship started, and the two things he continued to accentuate were how in his third year he felt a load of the young fellas had really matured and felt like they were offering something now. So that was one. And the second thing he said was about the team, and that he thought it's taken a long time to get the unity or the bond, but I think we have it there. Just back to the first one. Bringing back someone like Johnny Glynn, who hasn't been involved in a county hurling squad for 5 years, like what sort of message do you think that sends to maybe younger members of the squad? And as well as that, like 10 of the guys that were on the pitch, that featured on the pitch of the 20 that came in, were involved in 2017. And this isn't a county that's been starved of underage glory, quite the opposite. And as Martin Furlong says there, Galway won 4 All-Ireland minor titles in the late 2010s, and only 2 have come through to the senior panel. Why is this the case? Like, it does seem like I'm thinking when he was installed for a third and potentially fourth year that, okay, there's a project that's building. But when you look like they're going back to they're brilliant players. Don't get me wrong. But there's a balance between that experience and everything that they bring and the youth. Whereas it seems like to me at the minute, it seems like it's nearly all experience kind of everywhere. And as you say, probably in horse racing parlance, cough or toe in different areas of the field as well, aren't they? Like
big time, yeah. I think Galway have too many old soldiers on the battlefield at the moment, and that's a big problem. Nobody admired Henry Shefflin as a player more than I did. He had a brilliant career, the most decorated hurler of all time. And in fairness to him, as a manager, he is very personable, a pleasure to deal with, just a genuinely nice guy, I have to say that. One of his selectors, Damien Deise, was Galway captain when I was team manager. He's a man who's obsessed about Galway hurling. He was obsessed about his own individual preparation, one of the most professional players I ever came across in terms of training and looking after himself. Like, there's a good management there. I think the pressure was cranked up, however, when they brought in Eamon O'Shea. And, supporters are waiting to see the influence that they had anticipated in Galway's attacking play. But when you have games like last Saturday, when Wexford defenders are hurtling into you at 100 miles an hour, Galway were unable to create the time and space to put in whatever game plan they had. And the lack of leadership in Galway's ranks over the final 20 minutes was kind of alarming. They had few people to win the hard ball. I mean, at one stage I saw Fintan Burke out challenging for a high ball 25 yards out from the Wexford post. He's supposed to be in the full back line. It was like as though the Galway players were going everywhere and anywhere in desperation trying to salvage a result. And it was just chaotic at times. I just think it's a time for cool heads. Obviously, there's going to be an awful lot of criticism out there, but you take the previous weekend, Liam Cahill was under savage pressure, Keith Rossiter was under savage pressure. But in fairness to both camps, they turned things around. They looked into their souls and found something that maybe they didn't even think was there. Galway have still good hurlers. I mean, the likes of Conor Cooney, Brian Concannon tried hard on Saturday, but it just didn't happen for them. But they've got to shake up the team. They've got to start playing players in their best positions. They've got to bring in a couple of young players. Like I saw Tiernan Killeen playing a league match against Cork a couple of years ago in Páirc Uí Chaoimh, and I thought this guy has something. In modern hurling, Mike, even at junior B level, if you can't run and stay running, you're going to be exposed. But at the elite level, it's a different ball game altogether. And I think Sean Lennon has to come back into midfield, bring some aggression into that area, put Dahi Burke back in full back. If they're going to stay with McIntyre, give him back the number 6 jersey. Bring Pádraig Mannion back out to number 7. And maybe put Conor Whelan out on the 40, centre forward, where the action is. I mean, he's their go-to man up front, but he gets a ball every 2 or 3 minutes, and people are expecting miracles from him. And it's probably okay if they're dominating the matches, getting a lot more possession than that. But Whelan is such a hard man to tie down, and maybe if they had him out in the half-forward line, it would keep the opposition defenders a little bit busier. So I think Galway need to be a little bit radical. Their season is not quite on the line because in all known forms they should still beat Antrim and Dublin. But they have been wounded, and it'll be interesting to see what kind of response that we have from them over the next few weeks.
They've probably been wounded in Henry's other years after that Leinster final, and I know you said Cork ran them off the pitch at different stages in the quarter final, but they were still able to get a result. Same last year after the Leinster final. And the heartbreak that surrounded that, they came out and did get a good result against Tipperary.
But Tipp were very poor that evening, Michael. It was the heaviest 2-point defeat I ever saw. And Galway weren't bomb-proof that evening. But as you said, they showed character to regroup after what was, neither of us ever experienced such a sickening defeat. I mean, it was horrendous. I mean, the game is in the bag. And it must have been soul destroying, and they lifted themselves for Tipperary, got the result. To be honest, it doesn't matter to Galway how bad or how good Tipperary were. The important thing was winning. And in the subsequent semi-final, for 40 minutes, they had Limerick really on the ropes, but they weren't able to kill them off. I mean, Cathal Mannion's return is bound to make a big difference to them. I presume they minded him on Saturday, probably in the hope that they didn't need him to get over Wexford. So it's been a great hurling championship, and a lot of the focus has been on Munster. But what's happening in Leinster? We all thought it was automatic another Kilkenny-Galway final for the 3rd year in a row, but the cash has been thrown in the Munster page. I hate using cliches, but anyway, there you go, and that's the way it is.
It could still well end up as a Galway Kilkenny final.
Of course,
plenty of drama along the way. The one thing about the Galway Antrim game is Galway have proven it time and time again against inferior opposition. They generally lay waste to inferior opposition for whatever reason. It's funny, if Wexford could do to inferior opposition what Galway do, they'd be one of the best teams in the country because they always seem to raise themselves against the better teams. But John, you obviously are a proud Tipp man. You're a proud Lura man as well, and heard for Tipp back in the day as well, obviously too. You must have taken a good bit of heart out of Saturday night because things were low after the previous week, 15 points, and you're kind of wondering, is there hassle in the castle or whatever? But that was a good performance, and it was a performance where it looked like it was gone away from them, and they were still able to dig in. And like Liam Cahill, I think showed his relief after because the players probably didn't cover themselves in glory the week before, and maybe the kind of half didn't look like they were playing for him almost, but they definitely played for him the other night, and that was a massive result for them to get.
Oh, absolutely. It keeps them alive in the championship. And, to be honest, the Limerick game, only for Peter Casey's injury, I think Tipp would have been beaten 20 points or more because it rattled Limerick. And Liam Cahill said a lot as in the aftermath of defeat. I I have been that soldier. Sometimes you let your emotions get the better of you, and in the cold light of day, the following morning, you're kind of saying to yourself, "Oh God, why did I go down that road?" So it was a difficult, challenging week for the Tipperary management and
Hey
players.
John, just on that, me and you, our jobs would be much harder if lads didn't go down that road. That's without being smart, that's the 5 or 10 minutes of pure rawness where you say what you
Yeah.
actually think. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. And I was that soldier. I remember back in, was it the 2010 All Ireland quarterfinal where Galway were actually playing Tipperary when I was team manager, and we looked to have got there. We're 2 points up, time running out. Ollie Canning got injured. I remember after an incident with Owen Kelly, and Tipperary got 3 late points to carry it off. And subsequently went on to win the All Ireland. So we were that close, and it was just very emotional, the Galway dressing room afterwards, because a year's work was gone, and maybe a little bit unluckily. But I understood where Liam Cahill was coming from. He was frustrated, he was agitated, he knew the critics were on his back. Not everybody was happy in Tipperary the way Tipp got rid of Colin Bonner. And there was a sense down there that Liam Cahill was waiting in the wings, that he was already lined up to take over from Bonner. And of course, then he was going back to Walsh Park, where he had been a number of years with Waterford. And from their perspective, this is a man coming back in who probably had left them in the lurch. So the stakes were extremely high. But Tipperary regrouped very well. I think moving Ronan Maher out to centre back was a big thing. Cathal Barrett being fit to line out was another factor, and also the fact that the 15 players they had on the field, including Noel McGrath, the stakes were high. There was more urgency. There was more pride. There was a greater honesty of effort. Now, maybe Tipp have an issue with Limerick. I don't know. Maybe they're intimidated by Limerick at the moment or what. But the reality is they had to get a performance down in Walsh Park, and they had battled for their lives. But 4 points down in injury time, Waterford looked to have the game done and dusted, and for Tipperary to salvage a result. Psychologically, Michael, that is absolutely massive. And they still have work to do, but at least now they're back on a firm footing. Mark Kehoe played well in the forwards. Jake Morris was a lot smarter and quicker with his deliveries. I mean, the number of times he was blocked down against Limerick was criminal. So you learn lessons when you have a bad day. When the team has a bad day, you just have to take it on the chin, learn the hard lesson, and try and put it to good use the next day. And my own club mate Bonner Maher came on and again made a difference. And
he hit a fair wallop the minute he got in. He was a lucky boy. I don't know how he didn't see a card.
I was shocked at that because I was shocked at that because I can never remember a Laura player hitting anybody.
I can never remember a Lure player hitting anybody on the ball, let alone. But John, he was very smart in that last play. He knew, I think he knew not to have the shot himself, and he knew. I tell you what, James Owens was fairly whistle happy to say the least. But they made him make a decision. And they kept recycling the ball.
And in fairness to Tynan, he was brave carrying the ball into traffic. But wasn't that a bizarre incident? Owens kind of almost standing in front of Hogan for the Waterford penalty. I mean, that should have been retaken. I mean, Hogan was clearly unsighted, and I thought Tipperary should have protested more about that. But there you go. I think Waterford would be a little bit disappointed they didn't win. Dessie Hutchinson did some great things and did some things that you wouldn't expect of a player of his caliber. And they had put themselves into a winning position. Some of those players have been to hell and back over the last 2 or 3 years in the Munster Championship, and having finally got a win over Cork, I think they felt they should be beating Tipperary, especially the way Limerick had walked over Tipp the previous weekend. But they missed a few chances, and it came back to haunt them. But Waterford are still, they're still in the championship, and there's a lot of hurling to be played before it's decided who the 3 teams are coming out of Munster.
Just on the penalty, John, that was a bizarre one because he
Mm.
had to have been in Stephen Bennett's eye line and Barry Hogan's eye line. He was on the right hand side of the post, just nearly as Bennett was raising the ball, and then all of a sudden he was on the left hand side of the post. I don't really know what he was doing there. And Barry Hogan's I would say he's a kind of a quiet enough player, but he was
Yeah.
kind of looking over at Owens as if to say, like, what are you doing? Like,
Well, can you imagine if Davy Fitzgerald was in goal? What would have happened? Cheap.
Well, as somebody said to me this morning, John, like Hogan shouldn't have poked out the ball, and he should have demanded that potentially that free kick. But it's very difficult unless you're in that scenario. How do you react?
Of course, yeah.
It's totally unprecedented. I don't ever remember anything like that happening before.
Yeah, no. Likewise, it was. I didn't realize it until I saw it on television last night. How bad, because I was down in Wexford Park on Saturday, and I said I'd heard a bit of comment on it, but definitely it should have been retaken. Obviously, Owens didn't mean to be there. There's no question about that. But somehow it just happened, and in the interest of fair play alone, Bennett should have been asked to retake the penalty, But a cracking game. I mean, the hurling at times wasn't for the purists. Waterford got some fantastic scores. I mean, Caelan Lyons, just when he breaks forward with that ball, he's just an exceptional player and very
He's a
accurate.
bit of a freak, John, isn't he? He's a bit of an athletic freak. If he gets the ball in his hand, it's nearly too late. If he has open ground in front of him, you're done.
I think Waterford will regret Mike not maybe pressing up on the Tipp hook out a bit more. Maybe sat back a little bit in the last 2 or 3 minutes, invited Tipp to come at him. Now, there's an element to look about Kennelly's goal at the finish, and you could argue he was in the square. It wasn't his play.
You could more than argue it. You could more than argue it, John, I'd say somehow.
Yeah, but I don't know how these square balls are not being adjudicated correctly. I mean, there's just no way Gallan's goal should have been allowed to stand against Tipperary. I mean, he was nearly in the net, never mind being in the square. I mean, it's just ridiculous. But, sometimes the breaks go for you and sometimes they don't. You look at the football match in Pearse Stadium yesterday, Galway had a big gripe over the referee when Cian Darcy was pulled back for taking a quick free after Tierney was fouled. Then when Sean Kelly was trying to release a loose Damien Comer, the referee, David Goff, signalled for a sub to be brought in. But then you could argue that Galway got a couple of very soft frees near the end, including because Conor Loftus, to me, he looked as though he was being fouled. Galway certainly surrounded him as they're supposed to do, but I just thought the tackling was a little bit, it wasn't legitimate, but they probably balanced out, and Gleeson stepped up and nailed a magnificent winner. So very contrasting fortunes for Galway over a 24-hour period.
Just back on Tipp, John. Like, do you think? I think Ronan has to stay out in the half line realistically, doesn't he? But like Barrett coming back in frees him because like Barrett gets like some very bad press at times. Like, to me, I don't know about you, like, but if I was picking a team and he was available to me, he'd be the first one in my team sheet nearly every day. He's so abrasive. Yeah, he's so abrasive, and so he brings the thunder every day. And I even thought in the first 10 or 15 minutes he got in some great flicks, and he's a general annoyance, like and I mean that in the best way possible. Breen was good at times on Bennett. Just on Waterford though, John, this is a missed opportunity for Waterford realistically. Like, Waterford should be on 4 points and should have definitely 1 foot in the qualification in the spots, and nearly should be eyeing a Munster final spot. Like, contrasting emotions at the end, like Liam Cattle, I'd say like it was nearly like a bank robbery job, like a smash and grab, whereas Davy feels like I'm sure he's after been pickpocketed, I'd say.
Yeah, although in fairness to Davy, I thought he was quite rational after the game. By his standards. By his standards. And you see, the reality though for Waterford is that are they going to get anything from Clare and Limerick? That's the problem.
Both away.
They're two massive games. Waterford's recent record against Clare is deplorable. And the fact that Davy Fitzgerald is rolling into town with Waterford is a disadvantage for Waterford. Just like any day Henry Shefflin is on the sideline with Galway playing against Kilkenny. It's a disadvantage. Human nature being what it is, and it doesn't matter how great a player you are for your native county. If you rock up with the opposition, I think it stokes the passion of your home players.
That's why Tipp got you in 2010, John, down the home stretch.
Possibly.
They saw the man in the maroon and white tracksuit bottom on the sideline and said, we'll give him one today.
Yeah, there you go. But you're looking, what can you do? I mean, we find ourselves in these situations. Nobody can take away where your roots are from and all that. When you end up in another county and you're being given a job to do, business is business, and you have to take care of it. But the difficulty for Waterford now is, will they get anything from those two games? I thought Clare were superb against Cork. Look, they could have lost the game. It was a free-rolling, high-scoring, end-to-end battle. Cork showed a lot of character. So did Clare, but especially the Bar, because 6 days previously, what happened to them in Ennis? 9 points up against the All-Ireland champions. Their supporters delirious with joy. And somehow, almost in the blink of an eye, they're beaten. Again, they had to go through a massive challenge to lift themselves, but they did. And they didn't have Tony Kelly hurling against Cork. So Clare have no excuses now. They got the kick in the pants, as we said earlier, against Limerick in the last 10 minutes. They worked hard to regroup. They're bound to get Tony Kelly back to full fitness. And their recent record against Waterford is good. So, and then Waterford against Limerick, God, I don't know. I just wonder that missed point that Waterford had yesterday, not winning against Tipp, will it come back to haunt them? But we don't know. We don't. Every game is different, Mike. I mean, the championship, hurling championship, has been slightly less predictable than any of us would have thought at the beginning of it. So who knows what surprises are in store down the road? But certainly,
that's the beauty of it, though, isn't it? That's the beauty.
Yeah.
The unpredictability is the beauty of it, and even like that draw, just that breathes oxygen into Cork this weekend when it should do anyway. I'm sure they trained. Maybe they trained Sunday morning after the game, and like, Jesus, lads, will be coming with a spring in their step, knowing, geez, if we win our 2 games, we are in with a serious shout here.
Yeah. No, it's just I think it's great for the championship. I remember when I was Galway manager, I think we had a couple of great victories in the round robin against Clare and Cork in All Ireland qualifiers after losing badly to Dublin in the Leinster semi-final in my last year in charge. I remember, I think Waterford got hockeyed by Tipperary in the Munster final. And I heard on the following evening that Davy Fitz on the bus told the players they were coming in the following morning to have a debrief and whatever else went with it. And I was worried when I heard that, because I would have much preferred if they didn't regroup till the following Tuesday night and let the bloody thing fester for a little bit longer. And Waterford beat as well in that All-Ireland quarter-final. And it just shows you, we all form an opinion on what we're just after seeing. And we say, player X isn't up to it, player Y mightn't be too bad, the manager doesn't have it. And then 7 days later, you're saying about the same individuals, God, that was terrific. And you've almost forgotten what you'd seen the previous weekend. So that's the problem now with the hurling championship, to a certain extent, more so than the football championship. You don't know what's going to happen. And you think you're being rational. Sure, look at it. Antrim were after being beaten by 30 points by Kilkenny. How in heaven's name they haven't a prayer against Wexford, even up in Belfast?
Hey, John, it's like a horse with 3 zeros beside its name and then coming out and having a 1 beside its name. You know what I mean?
That's why I'm sticking now generally to backing horses in grade 1 and grade 2 and grade 3 races, because those upside down handicaps in Clonmel and Thurles, it's into the poorhouse.
John, who are the 3 that you think will come out of Munster, and in what order? And same question for Leinster.
I thought we were wrapping up. Why do you leave the toughest questions to last?
That's what, John. You know that as an interviewing technique. You soften someone up, and then you drop a few bombs at the end.
I wouldn't be surprised if Cork take Limerick to the wire this weekend.
Okay.
I think they've no other choice. And Limerick have probably think they have most of the hard work done. It might disarm them slightly. So I don't think that result is a foregone conclusion. I mean, I just think it's a game that Cork really have to produce such a high intensity display. Now, Cork are not going to win if they don't shore up their backline. They're just conceding too much. They're scoring enough at the other end, but they're just hemorrhaging scores in their own backline. They've got to get Mean back there, or else their season is over. I think Limerick and Clare will probably come out, and I think the last position is still up for grabs. And I just wouldn't like to call it at this stage. In Leinster, you'd expect Kilkenny and still Galway, obviously, to come through. Wexford's loss to Antrim could end up being fatal. And if Dublin do what they have to do, they might just sneak it. But again, it's not certain. So I'm afraid I'm not nailing my colours to the mast, because at this stage now, I just don't know. I just don't know about the 13-minute group.
Isn't that a great way to be? Because the last thing we want is predictability.
Yeah.
This has been one of the most unpredictable. This is all the hallmarks of the 2019 finale in Leinster anyway, for me, where results are you're looking at a table and it's changing as the games go on, and one team is coming in and one team is going out. And like before last Saturday, Galway's only loss in the round robin was to Dublin at the end of the 2019 championship. Do you know what I mean?
That's right. They have been very consistent in the round robin. So, but I just think the Galway season has to ignite it, Mike. You know, the 5 matches that you would have liked to have seen Galway winning. I know it was only the Walsh Cup, which was the final. The loss to Wexford. The loss to Tipp in the league. I think Limerick were reduced to 14 men against them in the league, if memory serves me correct. And Galway still fucking win. They were lucky to draw against Kilkenny in the championship and heavily beat them last Saturday. So the 5 games, the 5 most important games Galway have played this year, they've won none of them.
Yeah, that's definitely a big worry. The last one I leave you on this, John. I'm just like the amount of commentary and comments coming in about referees and refereeing decisions and standard of refereeing. What have you made of the standard refereeing? There seems to be more controversial calls. There seems to be a controversial call, or a couple of them, in nearly every game at this stage.
Yeah. Oh, look at Mike. I'm inclined to give referees something of a free pass, especially in hurling. The ball is flying at 100 miles an hour. There is so much happening. We think everything we see that the referee sees, but that is not the case. And you're looking, like you're at pitch, on a pitch, the referee is at ground level with the rest of the players. His view can be obscured. When you have an elevated impression of what's happening and you're looking down, you're in a privileged position. You're seeing things that the referee isn't even aware of. And then people are wondering, how in heaven's name did he not give a free in that situation? So I have huge sympathy for referees. Of course, there are still mistakes made which just defy logic. But in a general situation, these guys are amateurs. They sign up, they put themselves out in the middle of the field with huge crowds at the matches, huge responsibility on them. They're trying to do the best that they can. We're all prone to making mistakes. It's a highly pressurized zone out there. And I think in a lot of cases, referees are being blamed for things that they shouldn't be. So I'm inclined to think it's a bloody tough job that they have, and we should respect them a lot more. I mean, look at rugby, for instance. I mean, referees are still making the odd hard to understand call, and they have more TV refs and videos and all that. They can consult and look back at an incident. They could have made a wrong call initially, and then they have the option of changing. We don't have that in the GA, and it's probably for the better, because in hurling anyway, it's all about free-flowing struggle for supremacy. The last thing you want is going up to video refs and the game being held up for a minute and a half Well, did he actually pull his jersey or did he not?
Yeah, the last thing I say to you on that, we need to be incentivizing referees more, don't we? Like, because it's not an appetizing job, and we
No.
need to. We need to be looking after them a bit better. We need to be training them a bit better. Probably the area of umpires and things like that needs to be looked after as well. Maybe where we have actual officials doing umpire, maybe that can help the referee maybe a bit more or something too.
I think that would be maybe the way to go, Mike, because at the moment, although they're being more proactive, but it's a very slow process. We really need linesmen and umpires to almost be thinking like referees themselves. And if they see something that the referee hasn't viewed, call it out and give them the hand that they need. And there has to be more interaction at that level. But look, here we are, another Monday lunchtime, and we think we knew a lot last Monday. In some ways we know more, but in other ways we know less because the bloody thing is so unpredictable. It's head scratching time, to be honest. But the bottom line is, after the weekend hurling matches, Wexford and Tipp are back in business to some extent, and the Galway footballers are the kings of Connacht for the third year in a row, for the first time in 40 seasons. And as I said earlier, I think Galway footballers are dangerous now. The hurlers, well, they have lots and lots of work to do, but I wouldn't write them off entirely.
Good man, John. Thanks very much for your time.
Cheers,
Really
Mike. Good
appreciate
to
it.
talk to
Thanks,
you.
John.
Mind
Talk to you
yourself.
soon. Will do. Good man. Great to chat to John there. As always. I'm just going to take him out here now. Thanks, John. Good man. That's brilliant. It's funny to hear Pádraig Joyce talking in the aftermath of the Connacht final. One of the big things he kept going on about was things that have been written about his inability to get over Mayo team. So I thought that was interesting. I don't think John was the journalist in question, although just fly through a couple of other quick results here. Obviously just read out the only result in Leinster was Wexford finished 128, Galway 23 points. Really, really polished performance from Wexford, real high octane stuff. Keane Byrne was sent off. Just an incident that we hadn't talked about, actually. Keane Byrne was sent off just after the 50th minute for, I'm sure it wasn't intended, but it finished up in a nasty, nasty injury to Donald O'Shea, who had to go off. And I just think with a tackle like that, I don't even know if you'd call it a tackle. I do think we need to tread really, really careful on this, and I do think it was a red card, and I do think those types of things we need to be calling for red cards, because there's a potential for really, really serious injury in that type of instance. And there were a couple others in other games. Mentioned the Bonner Matter one. He was probably lucky he was just on the pitch for that big kind of high tackle he put in. Like, amazing he didn't get a yellow. I don't even know if he got ticked even. But that was a huge win for Wexford. Massive result in down in Walsh Park as well. To finish Waterford 321, Tipperary 127. So Waterford on 3 points now, having played 2 home games in a row, and they have to go to Clare and go to Limerick. It's funny, you have the Davy Lone derby up next again in I think it's either Saturday or Sunday week. It's going to be they're going to be skin and hair flying in that, no doubt, with so much to play for there as well. And just fly through to Joe McDonagh as well. A great result for Down. Finished Down 319, Westmeath 125 up in Ballycran. Huge result for Down, who I believe Dermot O'Sullivan is on the line for them this year, or has been helping out anyway in recent times, and Trevor Fletcher from originally Tipp man Ross Gray, but living in Kilcormac now, he's involved with Down as well, making the commute up there. Big result for Down. A disappointing result, you'd have to say, from a Westmeath point of view. Here's a team that played Leinster Championship last year, got a big result against Wexford, and now they're down in the McDonagh, and you're expecting them to be competing at the tail end of the competition, and they're already out of the running. So they've run out of road, unfortunately. Big result down in Austin Stack Park as well. It finished Laois 125, Kerry 18 points. So Laois are 3 from 3 now. They're in a really, really good spot. You'd imagine that they have 1 foot in the final. Kind of a lot of their play going through Paddy Purcell by all accounts, and Aaron Dunphy has kind of really stepped up. I think he's captain this year. Good result for Laois. Kerry not out of it by any means. They play Offaly on, I think it's Sunday week. And that's kind of a de facto semi-final, so that's going to be that'll be a really interesting game. Offaly come into it in good form, albeit beaten by Laois first time out. Did a big result against Meath at the weekend. Finished Offaly 5-31, Meath 3-16. Game was played in Trim, I think, which was an unusual one. I know Park Talton, there's some developments going on there. I don't believe the pitch was supposed to be closed during those developments, but primitive enough, shall we say, facilities in Trim for an inter-county game, especially in the second tier. Just something I wanted to say as well. The Talton Cup is been launched tomorrow, and we talked earlier about like Hurling's lack of promotion. There was no launch for the McDonagh Cup this year, like the Talton Cup equivalent in hurling. I do not think we're doing ourselves any favour as regard promotion of hurling in Offaly. Far from it. Like, if anything, we're trying to narrow the pool almost, and the pool is already narrow enough as it is. We just fly through a couple of football results really quickly. Two big results, obviously. Connacht football final, high drama there at the end, as John McIntyre was saying. Conor Gleeson coming up, kicked over a 45 and then kicked over a long free to win it. Has probably been much maligned in Galway at times, and people not sure about who the keeper should be, but Conor Gleeson laid out a fair marker yesterday. Great to see the celebrations after. People giving out, like, if you compare the celebrations, Galway winning Connacht compared to Kerry winning Munster, they're fairly poles apart. But like, even Galway were, really, really living it up and celebrating it, and so they should, because winning a Connacht title is still a big deal. That's the first three in a row, as John says, since the 40s. The Munster football final finished Clare 113, Kerry 23 points. Probably a good bit more competitive maybe than most people thought, and like a classic example of why provincial finals should be played in these provincial grounds. It's a really good atmosphere in Ennis yesterday, really good kind of buzz around the place, compared to realistically what you're going to see in Croke Park on Sunday between Louth and Dublin, when like we'd be lucky if we get 30,000 into the place. Realistically, just fly through a couple of comments. One comment in here: lots of leaders on the field for Tipp Saturday evening. Bodes well for them and Cattle in the short and longer term. Yeah, they definitely needed lads to step up, and I think Ronan going out to centre back was a huge one. Even I know Craig Morgan probably came off second best in his duel with Deise Hutchinson, but he was letting Deise know about it any time, the ball didn't go over the bar or whatever, and he was up for it, and that was kind of a sign all around the pitch. I think it was a clever move not putting Colin Barrett in on Deise as well. Like, the last thing, if you haven't played a competitive inter-county championship game all year, the last thing you want to do is go in on top of Deise. Porter just says good Clare crowd at the Munster final. Yeah, brilliant Clare crowd, and I think like that should be all the evidence that fixture makers need and that Croke Park need to realise where these games should be played. Cash and King says Joe McDonagh is a belter of a competition. It is. Like, at the minute, you have Leitrim in pole position, Offaly and Kerry are next best, and Down aren't exactly a million miles behind. So there's lots of people, lots of counties in the running there for the two spots. And amazing to think that I mentioned 4 counties there, and Westmeath, one of the pre-competition favourites, aren't in the mix. Liam Mack 01 just says Owen Conley was very impressive in first half, put Barron on the back foot. He surely did. Barron was still very, very lively, but he wasn't able to have the impact on the scoreboard, would say, that he did in the Cork game. And Conley was good, was taken off. I was probably surprised a bit how soon Noel McGrath was taken off, but John came in and had an impact, and all Tipp got a bounce from their bench, in fairness. And it was obviously Tipp outscored them in terms of the number of scores. It was 28 scores to 24 as well. And on the balance of play and on the balance of some of the decisions, I do think they deserve to get something out of the game. Jack just says Leinster final should be in Navan or Tullamore. I think it's a no-brainer, Jack, to be honest with you. Just, even the hardship involved, maybe not too bad for Louth people, but the hardship for others of getting to Croke Park and everything that comes with it. A provincial ground end, just everyone's kind of closed in on top of each other. The atmosphere is condensed. Even like games that even aren't that competitive played in provincial grounds, to me, there's an awful lot more to offer, in my opinion anyway. I'm just going to fly down through another couple of quick results from the Hurling Championship. I'm just going to bring them up here. Yes, it was another kind of busy week. I still can't get my head around the whole GA Go thing and how we're basically avoiding, what it looks like to me anyway, avoiding putting hurling on our national broadcaster. I just cannot get my head around it. I'm having internet problems here at the minute. So that's it for today's show. As always, brought to you by orgaretro.com. Use the promo code OurGame to get 15% off. And myself and Shane will be back on Thursday to preview loads of big action coming up at the weekend. And we will see you all then. Thanks very much, folks.